So before we get started, first of all, welcome. Happy Friday, everybody. This is a Florida EMS webinar. Myself, Dr. Pepe, Tanner Smita, we're very grateful that you're all here. If you're making plans for your conferences this year, we really hope that you're going to be here in Florida in June. You can see it's called First There, First Care Gathering of Eagles. And the reason why this year is going to be really great is because we got like the OG blood people coming. We're talking about Don Jenkins. We're talking about John Holcomb. Talking about Randy Schaefer. We're talking about Phil Spinella. We're talking about John Kramer. And it's going to be really great. And then of course Paul is going to be putting on the big show with all those people involved. So this is going to be really an amazing First There, First Care Eagles. For those of you who don't know, it's two conferences combined into one. First There, First Care is June 9th to 11th. Eagles is Thursday and Friday, the 12th and the 13th. Beautiful hotel, great time of the year, nice pools. Hopefully it won't rain.
Peter, while you're
Go ahead,
plugging
Paul.
it, I should say is that we're actually now entertaining that maybe that's going to happen mostly on the afternoon of Wednesday, I think. But we're thinking also entertaining of having a whole thing on mass gathering medicine and the risk of terrorism and how to predict it and what happened. And we'll have people talking from the Super Bowl shootings to the car attack in New Orleans, and I could go on and on. The whole thing. So
Wow.
it's got to be more extraordinary than ever before. So, anyways, thank you for letting me
Beautiful.
interrupt.
Cannot wait. We cannot wait. All right, so on to the main show. Today we have an amazing guest, and if you remember, we in the past had Jeff Hinshaw from North Carolina talk about his rural blood program, and then afterwards we were connecting, and he says, "You have to talk to Christina Warren." So of course I got on right away, and then we were very grateful that Christina said yes. She's the blood bank manager at Baptist, which is Atrium Health, Wake Forest Baptist. And I kind of titled it EMS Meet the Blood Bank, because people who say that EMS is gray know that the people in the blood bank are black and white. And we need to get to know who these folks are, because they're such an important part of the system, and the collaboration is key. And therefore, this is the first time we're having, at least on the Florida EMS webinar, someone from the blood bank. Christina, if you wanted to go ahead and share your screen, if you want to make any further introductions, welcome to the Florida EMS webinar. Thank you for joining while you're on vacation. By the way, she's on vacation doing this for us, so really appreciate that.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Peter. So my name's Christina. I have been working in the blood bank at Baptist for about 13 years now. I've worked in almost every capacity and every shift that we have available. Luckily, I'm lucky enough now to manage that team and lead that team. And one of the passions that I have is for our pre-hospital blood programs. I do want to talk a little bit first about who works in blood banks. Most blood banks are staffed with bachelor's degree graduates who have a degree in medical laboratory sciences. Then there is a board of certification exam to take by the American Society for Clinical Pathology to become a board certified medical laboratory scientist. After that, there's specialist exams that you can take, and the one for blood bank is called an SBB, or a specialist in blood banking. So usually labs are staffed with generalists, so medical laboratory scientists who may rotate through hematology, microbiology, other kind of genetics labs, and blood bank. I am lucky enough that in my blood bank, I have 30 dedicated transfusion medicine specialists that work with me only in blood banking. So our knowledge of blood banking is very, very strong, but do not ask us about micro or hematology or any other questions like that. So blood banks, also an important thing to know is that, as Peter said, we're black and white, right? We, in my lab, we are regulated by the state. We're inspected by the state, FDA, CLIA, and CMS, CAP, which stands for the College of American Pathologists, and AABB, which is the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies. So all of that, pre-hospital blood programs have really come out into the spotlight lately, and we'll discuss a little bit about why this poses a problem for our highly regulated mindsets of blood bankers. But I am excited to be here today and to talk to you about how we manage to support pre-hospital blood programs in our area. Let's see if I can get this to advance. Okay. So who are we and where are we located? We are Baptist. That's what we've always been known as, but we are now part of Atrium. So Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist, and also part of Advocate Clinical Labs, and on the campus of Wake Forest University Medical School. So Wake Forest gets thrown around a lot, but Wake Forest is actually a city in the eastern part of North Carolina, and we are located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So all those stories that went out about Hurricane Helene impacted part of our areas to the west a little bit. So we managed to escape any of that drama. So Winston-Salem is known for tobacco mainly. We have RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company, so Camel cigarettes, and we're often known as Camel City. We've got the home of Krispy Kreme donuts, so you're welcome for that, and Texas Pete hot sauce. When you ask Jeff what his community is known for, and a lot of the rural communities that we serve, he tells me moonshine and motorsports. So all of that combined really shows the health of the people in the areas that we serve here. I was kind of surprised when I met Randy Schaefer, who was mentioned earlier, to know that North Carolina is one of the leaders in pre-hospital blood programs. So a nice little map here showing current up to October. We might have a new version out there, but as of October of last year, this was current. All the red counties here currently have a blood program, and the yellow counties have up and coming programs that are planned to start hopefully in the next year. We do have a North Carolina Pre-Hospital Regional Blood Coalition and a link here to join. We do post lots of information about programs and policies so that you can copy and paste and hopefully not recreate the wheel. So a little history about the programs that we support. We actually started pre-hospital programs back in 2016 with our helicopters. We were using blood components at the time, red cells and plasma. We've now moved in 2017, we brought in whole blood. About when we went with air care in our helicopters, we had a county up north of us, Surrey County, who was like, hey, we want blood. So we brought them on board in 2016. 2020, we brought in the county to their east, Stokes County, and then Wilkes County in 2022. Once we onboarded Wilkes County, and that's Jeff's team there, he kind of got the word out and things kind of snowballed after that. So 2022 is when we started to see a big increase in the demand for whole blood and lots of counties wanting this product. So you can see here the counties that we added in the subsequent years with Alexander, Yadkin, and then we're onboarding Catawba County, hopefully this year sometime. So one of the important things to notice about these counties that we serve, none of them besides one really has any hospitals in their areas. The only blood that is in that county is the blood that we have on the EMS trucks that we provide. So a little bit about our volumes. We are not DC Fire. We are not transfusing 200 units a year in the field. This is a rural program. So since 2020 and 4 years, we support 4 counties, 3 helicopters, and 1 hospital-based ground transport program. We've transfused 480 units of whole blood, 65 of those being from my county EMS teams, 88 units of red cells with 4 coming from EMS, and 74 units of plasma. We have had 5 transfusion reactions, which is a rate of less than 1%, which mirrors what we have with our in-hospital transfusions as well. However, since we are a level 1 adult and pediatric trauma center, per month as a blood bank, we transfuse about 200 units of whole blood. So the whole blood that is transfused in the field is just a minor part of the blood that is transfused from my department every month. So for preferred products from EMS, we prefer to give whole blood. It's just everything all in one. You have places that still can only get packed cells, and that is perfectly fine. I'm not here to argue the best products to give. There's still studies out there to try to support that data. But we prefer leukoreduced, low titer, group O whole blood. We prefer leukoreduced because it allows for me to exchange my inventory around more easily and prevents some wastage. We do use a product that currently has a 21-day expiration. We do give RH positive to all of my pre-hospital blood programs. And when the products are old, we have the ability to bring them back into my house, put them in a refrigerated centrifuge, spin them down, and pack them into the packed red blood cells. At that point, they just become a leukoreduced packed red cell that I can give to anybody in the hospital. So greatly reduces wastage for our program. So this does mean that women and children of childbearing age are receiving O positive whole blood. I'm not here to argue that point. There's great articles, especially from 2019 out of Pitt, that calculates the statistics of anti-D and HDN if you're worried about that. But the great article says that, the HDN and death from hemorrhage is, when you weigh that, the risk of HDN is like 0.3%, and the risk of death from hemorrhage anywhere from 8 to 20%. So by not giving O positive whole blood to females and women, and children even, we're depriving them of a product that could potentially save their life because we're worried about a problem that might happen way down the road.
Christina, just do me a favor. If you can explain the leukoreduced and non-leukoreduced and why the higher wastage and maybe some of the controversies behind that. I know there's been some.
Yeah, sure. So leukoreduced products take your leukocytes, which are white blood cells, and filter them out. So when you have a lot of white blood cells in products, you have a higher risk of transfusion reactions. And really, as far as a blood bank perspective, we moved to universal leukoreduction as a blood supply over 10 years ago. So you're not going to find any non-leukoreduced blood products out there. When we're talking to our doctors in-house, they're really, most recently, they're like, we can't order leukoreduced blood anymore. And they're all worried about it. And we're like, you don't have to. That's all we have. Now, non-leukoreduced whole blood, some say it's better because every single part of the whole blood is in there. You're not removing any platelets. When we use leukoreduced whole blood and it goes through that leukoreduction filter, even though we're using a platelet sparing leukoreduction filter, some platelets are lost in that filtering process. But the fact that we can spin and pack this product, if we do not use it as whole blood, and give it to anybody in our hospital center really means that we don't have any wastage. We do use some non-leukoreduced whole blood. When we have a shortage of leukoreduced product, we will order non-leukoreduced, even from Texas. We'll get it in from wherever we can get it and stock it to make sure we have it for our trauma patients. But it is only used for trauma at our center. We do not further pack and process that, and we're not able to distribute it to anybody outside of the trauma program. So it's always important to also have backup products in mind. All of my agencies that we support know that if I'm running short on whole blood, they may end up with packed cells and plasma in their coolers. We do try to provide 1-in-1, so they can keep a 1-to-1 ratio of red cells to plasma should they need it. And we do still give Rh positive red cells in those instances. One of the other things you may see out there is a controversy on plasma. What kind of plasma is available in your area? We use liquid plasma and we use group A liquid plasma. So you will find that a lot of trauma centers move to using group A as a universal plasma product because group AB is only about 6% of the overall population. And the demand is just too high to give AB plasma, which is the true universal plasma, as trauma plasma. But if you're a gambler and you like to play the numbers, you have about 45% of the population that's group O, another 40-something% that's group A, and all of those people, which is over 80% of your population, is going to be automatically compatible with group A plasma. When we've been giving group A plasma as trauma plasma in the hospital, we have not seen any contraindications, even when we're giving it to B and AB patients. So deemed essentially perfectly safe for emergency transfusions. With liquid plasma, it is not a leukoreduced product, so we choose to irradiate it. The only indication for irradiation is to prevent transfusion-associated graft versus host disease. We do have lots of cancer center patients, et cetera, in our community. So of an abundance of caution, we do choose to irradiate this product, but it is not a requirement. So inventory management. This is really where our program shines and what makes everything work. So I have the inventory all at my hospital on my shelves in my monitored refrigerators, and I transfer it to whoever I think needs it. So we have a fairly sophisticated tracking system. Blood banks cannot use Epic, which is the main medical record system used by hospitals. We have to use a third-party system. Our systems have to be approved by the FDA, and Epic decided a long time ago it didn't want to have anything to do with that. So you'll find all different kinds of blood bank systems throughout the country that your blood banks will be using. We have special locations built into all of my blood bank LAS systems. So if I have units that I'm storing in the emergency department or the pediatric emergency department, a helicopter or an EMS location, I can actually change my inventory, not just physically, but also in my computer system, so I know what is where. We store our units based on expiration. So my short dated units are towards the front, and they will get used first out of my blood bank or stored in my emergency department. And my fresher units are going to go out into the field and get cycled back to me at due time. And then you'll see a picture down here, just in case anybody wants to know what packing looks like. When they become short dated, which to me is about 1 to 2 days before they expire, we will centrifuge them. And that pushes all of the red cells down into the bottom part of the bag, and your plasma will be at the top. Then we hang the unit into this plasma expressor and kind of let go. And the plasma expressor forces all of the plasma up out of the top of the bag. So you can see in the right picture, you end up with a unit of packed red cells and then leftover plasma that just gets discarded. So our inventory tracking system is, like I said, we do use our LIS, but we also use a lot of paper. We do have issue slips that we keep segments from the units of blood. If you're familiar with blood, you'll notice at the top, there's these little sealed segments on the blood bags. Those little sealed segments we keep in these little acetate folders as for who has what blood product. So I know that in this Air Care Lexington, I've written down the units that they have, and I have segments from those units in that acetate bag. If they call and they say they transfused, or they come back in and they don't have the blood product in their cooler, and I know it's presumed transfused, I fill out a tracking log that's pictured over here on the left. This alerts the management team that we need to expect a chart from the EMS within 3 days. It also pulls the segments aside, and it also alerts me that I have to save those segments. And when I get the patient into the hospital, I have to marry up the samples we get from the patient and cross-match the units that the patient got in the field with the patient to ensure that they were compatible. Communication. We have a very sophisticated communication with EMS, as you can see here. It's very hard to understand what these mean. This is one of my teams that likes to communicate via text and emoji, and the information that these texts provide is just invaluable to me. So usually I get the very simple text message like the top here, ambulance, blood drop, and I know they gave 2 units of blood in the field on the way to me. Another one that's a little bit more confusing would be hospital blood drop. So a lot of the EMS guys that work in the field, they also have services at some of the local rural hospitals. So they know that there's blood in the field on EMS that is not available in their hospital blood bank. They don't all have whole blood in the hospital blood banks. If they get a GSW dropped at their door and EMS is in the parking lot, they may choose to call EMS in and use the blood out of EMS. And this helps me know that I might find documentation of that transfusion in my blood, in the regular EMR, but it came from my EMS agency. So any of these kind of communication ways that you can come up with to help the blood banks track the blood to the patient is invaluable. The one that I hate to see is the one at the bottom, ambulance, blood drop, helicopter, blood drop. They use blood from everywhere that I have out there in the field. And now I'm going to have to piece together multiple charts to make sure the tracking of that is complete. So we support 2 types of pre-hospital blood programs. One of them uses active systems, which are just refrigerators, and another one uses passive systems, which are pre-packaged coolers. So for my active systems, things that you have to think about are how are you going to keep the blood cold, not just during storage, but also while you're getting the blood into that storage unit. Very few people want to carry a heavy refrigerator from the truck to the blood bank every single time they're switching out their blood products. So you do need to have a validated system that will keep your blood cold while it's being transported. There are laws that have to be followed from the FDA that tell you what the temperature of those products have to be. Again, we have a very sophisticated system for this, including a Ziploc bag and 2 cold packs that we validated to keep that blood cold for at least 1 hour while the blood is being transported into the refrigerator. You also have to think about how is the blood getting into these refrigerators. We use multiple types of courier systems. Some of the counties come right to me and park in the EMS bay, walk up to the blood bank and get their products. Others, I courier blood to a smaller blood bank site and they go to that smaller blood bank site and exchange with them. Still others will use a third-party courier system to achieve their products. It's all using a modified version of the same process so that my staff stays as least confused as possible. You'll hear the word validating and validation a lot with blood bankers. We are highly regulated. Everything is black and white. You can't just buy a refrigerator and put blood in it. We have to prove that that refrigerator will keep the blood at the appropriate temperatures while it's sitting in an EMS bay and while it's out in a truck. So my validations of these refrigerators always start in my office. Everybody is required to bring me their refrigerator, and I validate it while it's sitting next to me. The second part of the validation includes putting those units on the trucks, making sure that the Wi-Fi capabilities for temperature monitoring is working, and making sure that the refrigerators actually stay cold while the unit is out in the field. Once it's passed all of those products, then and only then is it approved to store actual blood products for use. So our passive systems, again, the same thing with inventory switch out. You have to have a plan. Blood has to stay cold during transport as well as during storage. We use Pelican Credo coolers. This probably looks similar to a lot of you out there using coolers. We have multiple different sizes of these coolers. Some allow for 2 whole bloods. Some allow for 2 whole bloods, 1 plasma, and 1 packed cell. Just depends on the needs of the county. The first thing I'm always asking an EMS agency is, well, what do you need? What kind of cases do you see? Can you have blood on a truck that stays on your truck? Or do you need to be able to take that blood off the truck, put it on an ATV, and go out into the backwoods to get your patient? You know, what do you typically see? So depending on their needs is why we have multiple systems set up. All of our coolers, we validate every 2 years to make sure that they're still maintaining temperature for the appropriate amount of time. We have these coolers validated for 4 or 5 days, depending on the size of the cooler. And every single cooler has a temperature probe inside of it with a readout on the top, so that the EMS agency or the helicopter can always tell what the temperature of the blood products inside are. If the temperature starts to get high, they call me and we switch them out and get them a new cooler. Temperature monitoring. So this is something that is highly FDA regulated. You have to make sure the temperature is monitored either continuously or documented every 4 hours. Both is best. So for our coolers, we have these temperature monitors that are logging the temperature every 30 minutes and continuously downloading the data. For our refrigerators, we have real-time communication monitoring systems between the units that are in the cooler or refrigerators, and it's uploaded into a cloud. My EMS agencies are responsible for responding to all of these alarms and letting me know if there's any issues. However, I do audit it on a multiple weekly basis where I call them all and ask them to send me their temperature data, and I can make sure that they're responding to alarms appropriately. You also have to be prepared to follow any retention standards for documents, whereas for blood bank, you can think pretty much everything you have to keep for 10 years. So all of your temperature data you have to keep for 10 years. It's not just something you can do and not prove that you're doing. As for one last temperature monitoring that we use on all of our units, we have what we use as a safety view. The picture up here on the top right. If the unit is white on the center, that means that the blood has stayed cold. If it's speckled and you're starting to see that speckly red, the unit is still good, but it might have gone into that transport range of temperature, which is up to 10 degrees centigrade. And then if it's solid red, you know that that blood has gotten too warm and you do not want to transfuse it. So any safety views that go red, the teams have to call me and we have to exchange product, and then that blood would be discarded. So training for EMS. We do provide on-site initial and annual training for our EMS partners. We cover training on storage and handling of blood products, blood inspection, how to chart transfusions per regulatory standards, and the need to get signed emergency release forms. We also go over just a little bit of science because we're science nerds, and we wouldn't be doing justice if we didn't tell them just a little bit about blood products along the way. It's one of my favorite parts of the program, actually getting out into the field and actually meeting all the people that are doing the frontline work. We are nerds. We stay in the lab. We don't see patients. And it's really good for us to see on the flip side how you guys are using these products. And I may be a little stickler about one point in the regulations. that's really hard to meet. So having these meetings with the teams and seeing their setups really helps us to be able to adapt what they're doing to the standards and come up with a plan so that we can make sure everybody is fulfilling everything that we need to do. Quality monitoring and improvement. This is probably the biggest piece that blood banks care about. For us, what we choose to monitor, we do monitor every single transfusion for appropriateness. So every single chart that is reviewed by me, and then it's also reviewed by our dedicated transfusion medicine pathologist. We look for compliance with regulatory standards, documentation of what was given, and we also look for signs and symptoms of transfusion reactions should they have been prevalent. With transfusion reactions, we also look at, how are we going to manage this in the future? What is the transfusion reaction? All of the 5 transfusion reactions that we have found and detected have been what we call delayed transfusion reactions. When we're looking at a delayed reaction, these are reactions that are detected actually by my blood bank staff and not by people in the field. They're detected on subsequent blood sample workups from the patient. They were all transfusion reactions due to ABO or RH antibodies. When we're dealing with these reactions, we have to take into account, is this a passive antibody or was it an antibody that the patient actually formed to the blood product? How many antigen positive units did the patient get? What is the potential for hemolysis in the future? We will contact the care teams and give them alerts. You guys need to be doing serial hemoglobins on this patient. They have the potential to hemolyze all 20 units they got, et cetera. We also perform an annual compliance audit. So every single year, I will take whatever standards I can get my hands on and audit my EMS agencies and our programs. So from helicopters all the way down to EMS crews. Currently, there are no standards for pre-hospital blood programs, but that doesn't mean that you're exempt from upholding standards. There are standards that apply. It's just that blood banks have to go through and figure out which standards those are. We do an annual refrigerator revalidation where we make sure that the units are still holding temperature per regulatory standards, and biannual cooler vet revalidations that we talked about. I make all of my crews do quarterly alarm checks for high and low alarms on their temperature monitors. Biannual agreement reviews. So every 2 years, blood banks are required to review all of their agreements with their suppliers. So any changes to programs, whether it's indications for transfusion, et cetera, have to be approved by the blood bank and the EMS agency. And then we talked about monthly temperature reviews. So the biggest question that I usually get is, well, what do we have to follow and what should we follow? And so that's the difference between FDA regulations versus AABB standards. So the FDA has the Code of Federal Regulations, and the ones printed here are the ones that absolutely have to be followed. You do not have a choice. It's FDA. Follow them or you can't have blood. For the Association for the Advancement of Blood and Biotherapies, the AABB, they establish standards that are met and they often exceed the FDA requirements, but they always meet the FDA requirements. These standards do not all have to be followed, but they are considered best practice in the blood banking world. And if you are trying to get a blood bank to work with you, following AABB standards is your best bet. Accreditation by the AABB is also not required, but again, it looks really good. If you're upholding AABB standards, a blood bank is going to trust you because you are inspected by the AABB and they know that you're upholding all of the FDA regulations that have to be followed. Exciting news is that the AABB will be publishing its first set of standards for pre-hospital programs in 2025. So soon we won't have to guess anymore which standards apply in the pre-hospital setting and which ones do not. So that is just a brief, quick overall view of the blood banking side of things. I will turn it back over to Peter, and he can go through questions, et cetera.
Amazing presentation, Christina. That's probably the best presentation I've seen as far as the depths of what is needed, what's required. But I think more importantly, this is for the first time I'm recognizing how integrated you are with your EMS systems. And now I recognize why North Carolina is so far ahead of the game, because you're actually like one. In other words, they're bringing you the cooler for validation. You're going there, you're doing the training. And I wonder how many other people are doing that, how many other states are doing that. Because what I think is happening, that happened here with us, is that we kind of like try to figure out what they want and we just kind of figured it out on our own. But the fact that you've like, so how did that happen? How did you and Jeff meet, and how did this whole thing happen? Did they ask you? Did you just do it yourself? Give us some information on that.
So I'm not a doctor. I cannot do anything without Dr. Fade. He is my transfusion medicine pathologist. He kind of just gives me the green light to make these programs function. So really it's all on him. But he started these programs with the manager before me with Air Care and Surrey County EMS. When I started, Stokes called me and they're like, hey, we want to do this too. So I just kind of copy and pasted, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I just went through standards and regulations and we're like, okay, this one applies and that one applies and that one applies. And it's just kind of been, learn and evolve over time. When Jeff called me, he did just call me out of the blue and he said, hey, this is a crazy idea. I want blood. And he really lucked out because we had been supplying blood to Forsyth County, which is the county we're located in. And they had given their coolers back and said, we don't really want to do this. We're not set up for this. And so I feel like we have had programs that have failed. And I think that's important because you do have to have buy-in from the counties and the blood bank staff. You can't just run these programs by yourselves unless you want to take on all of these things and run them by yourself. They can run just fine. So when Jeff called, I was able to say like, well, I have a bunch of coolers here I'm not using. So when do you want to start? They're already validated. So it was on him to really get his team educated and up and running first. So, but yeah, these programs are special to us. They're really our programs. When we started them, we did not trust EMS at all to do anything the way that we want it to be done. So that's why the programs are really managed from a blood bank perspective here, as opposed to like a more EMS based program like DC Fire or San Antonio have.
Let me bring in Jeff Hinshaw first, because Jeff, I want you to make some comments, and I'm going to bring Dr. Kramer, and then Tanner, I'm going to go to you. But Jeff, go ahead. I want you to hear your comments of what Christina just mentioned. You're on mute. No, you're still on mute. I don't know why that's happening.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Do you have me now? Yeah. Sorry, yep. I'm in the mountains in the Blue Ridge Mountains with snow behind me, so fingers are nice. Kind of cold. So, what was your question, Peter? I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted you to comment on the relationship, because I think, and Dr. Kramer mentioned it, that Christina has established a gold standard system. You're an EMS guy. Talk to the rest of us and explain to us, how do we make this happen in our communities?
I think we're a unicorn type system, and I got to give the credit to everybody who came before us. The guys at Surrey EMS who wanted to start this program to begin with. Again, they transitioned to a local hospital. It was the right time and the right place. I champion EMS agencies to look at your call volume. What does the data tell you that you need? I got to give props to our quality management folks at Wilkes EMS, Bryant Reed, then Jason Revis and the team. We looked and saw that there was a need. We had people with unique shock indexes. We had vital signs. We're a rural county. We're the 13th largest county in North Carolina, and sometimes over 2 hours to a trauma center by ground. So then, again, it was a reach out, and literally, Christina's right, it was a cold call. We didn't know each other, even we worked under the same footprint at the hospital for years together. And we met, they had the equipment. And again, it's been a mutually beneficial relationship. I've gone and done continuing education for her blood bank staff. And to watch them see the light bulb come on that, hey, this program that we're running really does impact, from traumatic arrest that is now home and now highly functioning, to where we had our first entrapment administration just a couple of weeks ago, where the patient was resuscitated with blood products while entrapped in a vehicle to the point where they needed to be sedated because they had gone essentially from dead to awake. Again, another tremendously positive impact of our blood program.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. Dr. Kramer, you're leading Whole Blood from a number of fronts with the National Coalition, and you've been very impactful with leading us into getting some CMS modifications and then the AABB standards. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just making a few comments and also mentioning about the AABB and just this topic in general.
Well, first of all, Christina, again, a phenomenal presentation, and you have established a very operationally functional system. You know, you mentioned the blood bank community seeing things in black and white. No question, the EMS community typically sees things in gray. I think one of the perspectives that I picked up is that even though there was concern on the part of the blood bank community about EMS agencies being able to successfully do this, the EMS agencies really have stepped up and proven that they can do it, and do it very cooperatively with the blood bank community. There are a lot of things going on. We currently have about 210 programs around the country. The AABB standards, as you alluded to, will be coming. I heard a rumor last week, maybe as early as within the next month or two. It's important for folks in the EMS community to understand that there will be an accompanying EMS guidance to help agencies get their programs up, with still being able to meet all of the compliance requirements. That guidance is being developed with a lot of input from EMS clinicians as well as the blood bank community. So, you know, what several years ago were two groups with significantly differing perspectives now being able to come together and realize that we can do these programs very effectively.
Great comment. I'm going to go to Tanner Smeda, my co-host. Tanner, go ahead with your comments.
Yeah, thanks again for the excellent presentation. And it certainly sounds like with your system having a blood bank that's so enthusiastic, already having equipment ready to go, your system does not have the problem that most systems have, where they're forced to kind of go and beg their blood banks for buy-in, and kind of worship at the altar of the blood bank. And so, you know, my question to you in relation to that would be, you know, for all of these kind of stringent standards, whether that's from the FDA or for the AABB, you know, things like having records of continuously monitor temperature data. You know, if there are EMS agencies out there that are wasting blood or aren't complying with some of these standards, not, you know, providing some of that data to their blood banks, can that negatively impact the way that blood bank is viewed by some of these organizations, impact their certification status, or, you know, from the regulatory side, can having an EMS system that does something wrong, so to speak, can that impact you in any way?
Sure. So I would say for me, yes, because I've taken ownership of these programs. It is my responsibility to follow all the guidelines. We have been inspected by FDA and AABB since we've been doing these programs for a long time, and we have never gotten cited for anything. So I know that we're doing things the way that they want. But again, I keep all the records on site with all my other things. So it's just something I'm really used to doing. If another, I know there's some agencies that where the blood bank takes the old products, right? So we have an agreement with several other facilities that want to use whole blood in their EMS programs. We don't want to be the provider for it. They're just too far away, but we're willing to be the dumping ground for the old units. We know that that blood bank upholds the highest standards. All blood banks have to qualify their suppliers. So if a blood bank is just going to be the repository for the leftover products, then they're going to have some kind of standard set up to qualify the EMS agency as a supplier. So the EMS agency is going to have to provide the blood bank with proof that while they have the units, that they're storing them appropriately per requirements. If that's the case, then I don't think that the blood bank would be responsible for all of the things that I'm responsible for. That would fall onto EMS.
Excellent question. And I think also, Tana, what you're getting at is, like, for example, Christina, if you come into a hospital and you need a cardiac catheterization, that physician, if he or she takes you to the cath lab and, does whatever procedure, but then you end up dying, because of the transparency, that physician gets dinged publicly saying that, bad doctor, and it makes them want to do less procedures, right, on the sicker patients. So the question, I think, is, do you as a blood bank manager have to be concerned that if, God forbid, and I know Jeff won't do this, but like if an agency does have an issue, does it reflect poorly on you enough that it may remove your ability to give blood to other EMS systems? And I probably know why John is raising his hand, Dr. Prim is raising his hand, because he mentioned it the other day that now, like, the 210 agencies that are out there are the high performers. The next 500 to 1,000 are the people who are in the middle of the bell curve saying, oh, I want to do it. And they may not be as good as, the Wilks of the world. So how would you think about that? And what do you recommend to the folks coming in the middle who may not be as good as the folks who are there now?
Yeah, so I absolutely will take blood away from an agency if they are abusing it or not following the guidelines. I'm not saying they can't have a program, but they're going to have to get their blood from somebody else. So they really want the blood and they're going to do what I say. Then the nice thing is that in our region, all of the EMS directors really have privileges at Baptist, and they're all kind of Baptist doctors already. So they're used to listening to me and my guidances from blood banks. So we have not had those issues, but these programs will not work if the EMS agencies don't work with the blood banks and don't listen to the regulations of the blood banks. But again, from what I've heard from Jeff, you guys deal with, narcotics and everything else. It's not like you're willy-nilly doing things. So I think it's just getting the information out there so EMS knows what they have to follow and that they're willing to do those things.
Let me go to Dr. Kramer first, and then I'll go to Joseph Zalkin. Go ahead, John, comment on that.
2 comments, Peter, and to re-echo Christina's comments. I mean, when an EMS agency is thinking about starting a blood program and they're working with a blood supplier, this is not a negotiation. EMS can't say, well, we'll watch the temperatures every 4th day, and if it gets above 5.6, as long as it's below 6, it's okay. This is not a negotiation. We have to comply with these standards. So an agency should not think about starting and I know that sounds very dogmatic, but should not think about starting a program unless they are willing to meet the standards and comply with the blood bank requirements. Marv Wayne made a comment about blood systems that aren't interested in working with EMS. That is a fairly significant problem. We're working with the national blood agencies, the Red Cross, ABC, BCA, to educate their membership about the importance of these programs. It's going to take time to get there, but the blood community is working on it.
Excellent. I'll go ahead, Marvin. I'll go to Joseph.
Yeah, I'll write it in the note.
Well, okay. Well, thanks, Marv, for coming on. Joseph, go ahead, because I want to end in a few minutes here because we want to get over to Pepe.
I appreciate it. Let me suggest, if you don't have a state blood coalition, start one. Because misery enjoys company. It's multidisciplinary. It involves folks like Christina, who is on our coalition. We need both the ability to communicate and the feedback from these other tribes that we work with. This you can accomplish. Better to plan ahead of time. Most systems take 12 to 36 months to work out the details from supply and protocol and what have you. I know Peter would be happy for you guys to shadow his coalition. I'd be happy for you to shadow ours. And there are many, many more across the U.S.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see there's a lot of comments coming in. Jeff says it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, slow and steady. And Marv, it's not the blood system, but our own hospital system that refuses the blood. The regional system is all in and the hospital is out. But I think there is a bit of peer pressure here, like Joseph was just mentioning, is that once they start to see, like in Broward County, Palm Beach County, it was a no-go. And then all of a sudden, there's whole blood everywhere. And now there's many more programs coming online. So Tanner, any last comments or thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think it was an excellent overview.
Yeah, this was amazing. This was people want to clone you. We're going to call you the blood bank barista. So you're gonna have to serve up some stuff. And then Jeff, final comments, and then Christine, I'll let you take us away with your final comments.
Again, Peter, thank you for the opportunity. Christina, I'll make you smile. I've drug her into the national spotlight. I cherish our personal and professional friendships as we work together on things like this. Blood does make an impact. It may not be for every agency, but I think every agency needs to look at it. And being a good Southern Baptist, I will close out with my usual statement. All stand and sing together, first, second, last. The hymn, there is truly power in the blood.
There really is. And we are going to give you a torch, Christina, to hold for us. So let me give you the last word. There's people on this call who are not doing blood yet. They're thinking about it.
I'm thinking I want to do it.
which I know you are, Marv. What's your comment to everybody, and give us your last words?
So I will say that, this is new in the blood banking world. Maybe not to all of us, but to most of us. We're part of the Atrium health system, but Atrium Charlotte still will not do this. So it's not just health systems, it's people. You have to find the blood bank medical directors and the blood bankers who are passionate about trauma medicine. I was a third shift blood banker at Baptist for years and saw all the traumas come through. And I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and that I like running those MTPs and those trauma calls and making sure blood gets out quickly and trying to make sure we have faster ways to do things. There's not everybody, right? Some blood bankers, this is a lot of work that we take on just outside of my current job, like PTO today, and here I am. So this is something that I'm passionate about. I don't have a solution for getting my colleagues in Charlotte passionate about it. I'm not, here to convince anybody that it's the thing to do, but if you're interested in doing it, there has to be buy-in from both sides. So if your blood bank is pushing back and not willing to do it, then you just have to find a different route.
That's a great comment. And I would say take this webinar, which I'll put on YouTube in a little while, and then send it out and show people that there are people like Christina Warren out there and then show them the map of North Carolina, right? And then send them Jeff Hinshaw's webinar showing how they're saving lives in rural America. This is happening. Do it right, do it correctly, have all your I's dotted, your T's crossed. And if there's anything we can do from the Florida side, North Carolina, of course, John, at the national level, please let us know. Christina, go back to your vacation. Thank you so much for everything you've done for us today. To everyone, we're signing off. And please click on the link if you want to join Dr. Pepe's webinar, which is live in progress right now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. That was awesome.